I'm delighted to be with Peter Harris. Peter Harris is co-founder with Angus Thirlwell of Hotel Chocolat, an incredible brand, I think, that's known for its ethics, for being edgy, and of course, personal experience, absolutely delicious. It's a really interesting story. I think you set the company up in 1987 when you met Angus at Torch Computers, so very, very different business, and then went into the Mint marketing company, which was all around, I suppose, corporate chocolates, or chocolates for corporate organisations. And then the history going through that, I suppose, that piece around a very innovative organisation, the setting up of Chocolate Express, which was all about mail order chocolates, and then the Chocolate Tasting Club. And so now to a place where I believe you have 62 shops in the UK, expanding into Europe, expanding into the States, and of course a wonderful hotel, the Hotel Chocolat, that was set up in St Lucia about 18 months ago, which is just fantastic. One thing I've read about you is that you do have a reputation almost for innovation, for sure, but also for sort of nurturing, if you like, and sitting on ideas and thinking about them before you actually act. So, and I suppose there's a real balance, isn't there, between having an idea and sort of noodling on it and then saying, okay, when's the time to make the action? So first question was, so many innovative things in that story. How does that piece from thinking about something to we're going to do it, where does that come from?
I mean, you've told my whole life story. It's fantastic. No, the thing that's really interesting is that we've had some great ideas, and there are a fantastic number of ideas around. But the most difficult thing is to actually have the courage to put them into practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what we've tried to do from the very start is when we've got an idea going and we've got another idea, is we give that idea a little bit of space. So when we were doing corporate chocolates and corporate mints, and we had the idea of delivered chocolate gifts. Then we created a little space physically, like a desk and some telephones. We didn't ask them to pay rent. We didn't necessarily allocate people exclusively, but we got people to answer the phone when it was required.
So it was almost germinating within the other part of the business, if you will.
Exactly. We actually call it, we incubate our own ideas. And it's not dissimilar to investing in a new idea, but we're doing it internally, so we're seeing if it goes, and as it starts to develop and can walk a little bit, then you can allocate a bit of resource. So that may be a member of staff, it may be a computer, it may be a piece of software, and as those ideas start to gather some momentum, then it becomes a separate business almost within the business, and then you can give it space and identity, etc. And that's exactly what's happened several times in our business.
So another one of your great innovations, I think, is the Chocolate Tasting Club, which I'm a member and I think is fantastic. I'm probably not I don't probably contribute as much as I eat in terms of feedback, but certainly when I do, and you must get a lot from that. You say you don't do research, but I would imagine you must get quite a lot from that particular group, which is huge now, is it not?
It is, it's got 100,000 members. I mean, the interesting thing about the Chocolate Tasting Club is we listen to our customers, and it's very much a theme of our whole culture, is that we listen to our customers, and it's not just the words. People used to say to us that they liked our chocolates, but they couldn't buy them anywhere. And we marketed ourselves as a delivered chocolate gift company. So in other words, the inference was it was going to a third party, so the chocolates weren't for yourself, although you were paying for them. And so we knew there was a little bit of demand for people to buy chocolates for themselves. And this also worked really well with the idea that through the whole year there was a very seasonal bias, i.e. Christmas, Mother's Day, Easter. And wouldn't it be lovely if we could have some idea that balanced our turnover and factory, etc. And so we came up with the idea of the Chocolate Tasting Club. And this was about people receiving fresh chocolates, specially designed for members of the Chocolate Tasting Club on a regular basis, for them to be able to experience them, comment on them, read little news stories about what the business was doing as a part of a membership.
Yes.
And it turned
into... And you do give all of that as part of it, don't
Absolutely.
you? All the stories about what's going on and who's
Absolutely.
who and where they're going and the whole journey with the hotel,
Exactly.
which is brilliant.
Exactly, it actually works as research as well, because we ask people to score the chocolates and they send in the scores. It's not compulsory, but they can by choice. And then we take a statistical sample.
I wanted a box of those.
That's exactly it, exactly. And they'll tell you whether they love things or whether they hate things. And we use that as research, and then those good chocolates will then appear in our shops. And so it wasn't done as a research thing primarily.
No, but interestingly,
but it works really well,
out, which is great.
It works really
and
well.
So I suppose that begs the question: did that partly prompt the expansion for shops and retail, or was that something that was always in mind anyway, but again the moment had to be right?
They were happening at about the same time, and they were independent. So we rebranded to Hotel Chocolat in 2003, and the reason we did that was because people didn't realise that our chocolates were such good quality, and we had to emphasise that in our name and be proud of it.
Yes,
and so we did that, and that made it easy then for people to understand that this was about good quality, and it was about authenticity and provenance, and all those things were so important. So then it led on to great quality chocolates, and then us being able to then look at the idea of selling or opening a shop as a pilot, just to say, well, look, if we opened a shop because we've been successful mail order and online, let's try a shop and just see if it works. But we're not retailers, so we didn't know whether that would or wouldn't happen, whether it would be successful.
And that passion that you obviously have for Hotel Chocolat, for chocolate, for what you do, where does that come from? Where does that drive and passion come from, do you think?
I actually think it comes from our customers. And, from the very start, there's nothing more motivating than a customer being happy with what you're offering them. And I can remember when we worked in a tiny little office in a place called Whittlesford in Cambridge, and customers actually liking visiting us, and yet we had nothing to show. We were just literally a very Spartan business, but they just thought, how can you run such an exciting business from such modest and humble building and circumstances? And yet they found that tremendously motivating. And in a way, I think what was happening there is that we were motivated from them, and they were motivated by us. And I think that relationship has been really quite important in the development of the business and the culture of Hotel Chocolat.
Yes,
so our customers like us, but our staff and our people are very motivated by that whole thing as well.
Well, certainly when you go into the stores, you do feel as though, I sound a bit weird now, you do sound as though the chocolates are sort of talking to you, because it's about people, or it's about the event, or it's about your lover or your partner or whoever it is. But there's almost a real story and passion around it, rather than I'm going to buy some chocolate in a nice box with a bow. It's a real difference to that.
It is, and we want our guests, as we call them, coming into our shops to feel very comfortable about that, whether they buy or they don't buy. We want them to be engaged with our people so that there's communication. We just want them to feel great. And, we always cite the examples of, if you go into a bad shop, you never want to go in there again. And conversely, if you go into a good shop, you want to keep returning. And we just want to create that whole feeling and ambience. And
which is great, because they are very beautiful, your shops, and they could be on Bond Street or wherever, but they're not intimidating. And some shops that are high-end premium brand can be quite intimidating for people.
We see ourselves as affordable luxury. And that's borne out by the fact that teenagers buy from us, that people on all different demographic groups buy from us, and are very happy with that.
In terms of where the business is and driving it forward, it's a phenomenal story. It's an incredibly inspiring story. Who and what inspires you? Or who or what, I should say.
I know it sounds a bit repetitive, but I think the customers and one of those major parts. But I think being involved in a business that lets you do pretty much what you want to do is actually quite unbelievable. If you work for a business where you're sort of working within a very tight terms of reference, it's limiting. And a great example of this is if we were funded independently, or funded by a third party, I should say, then it's quite likely that if we'd have said to those people within a sort of boardroom setting, oh, by the way, we're thinking of buying a cocoa plantation in St. Lucia, you can imagine the response wouldn't have been very positive.
Particularly favourable, no?
Whereas Angus and I, we just came up with the idea via a book that was given to us by one of the members of the Chocolate Tasting Club, and we decided to go out and look at this cocoa plantation. We liked it so much, and I'm normally the cautious one in our relationship, in our business relationship, and so I saw this estate and I just thought to myself, this is fantastic. And I said to Angus, we've just got to have this. And Angus said, whoa, steady on, you know, are you sure we oughtn't to look into this a bit more? And this is a classic role reversal, but it was absolutely true. And I think we came back literally within a week. And when we came back, we'd already signed the contracts when we were out there. And so we just knew that the people couldn't undo the deal, if you like, without there being a problem.
And what are the plans for the plantation? Because as I understand it, it wasn't in peak of condition when you acquired it.
I mean, it had no investment. You're right. I mean, it was still a beautiful location and a beautiful estate, but it was very overgrown, had very little capital investment in it, and we've worked really hard to regenerate that by planting tens of thousands of new cocoa trees. And but the plan's always been to build an experience centre where we actually make chocolate on the estate, and so people are able to then see from the beginning of growing cocoa through to how it's harvested, how it's fermented, how it's dried, how it's then turned into chocolate, and that whole process is a really exciting. Well, it's almost difficult to work out how anyone worked out how you could turn these beans.
Well, I've only seen cocoa
chocolate.
Beans once, and you think, how does?
I know.
How does that get to there?
It's not very straightforward.
No.
You have to
Do you
go
think,
through
did that
a
happen
number
by
of
accident?
Well, the answer is it's happened over a lot of, it's taken a lot of years, but to be able to show that to people who visit the estate is really quite an exciting prospect, and so that will hopefully be opened in about 18 months to 2 years' time.
Fantastic.
What would you say to someone that perhaps is thinking of, I don't know, making a change in their life or following their passion and doing something that they've perhaps thought of but really not done anything with?
It's funny, actually. There's some people work well doing their own ideas and some don't, but sadly the only time you'll ever find out is trying it and starting. And so it's an old bit of advice, is basically people say start now. And in a way you have to be prepared not to succeed. And I know it sounds funny, because if you're a confident person, you know you're going to succeed. And I suppose when we started our business, we started at a terrible time. There was a recession. I just moved into a house with a big mortgage. My wife had just stopped working because our first son was born. You think to yourself, for goodness sake, that's a ridiculous thing to do. But we just knew it was right, and we started it.
So that's self-belief, or that just an innate feeling, perhaps?
It is. It's self-belief, but it's almost, and some people might call it blind faith, but I don't think it's that. I think, people talk about luck, and I don't actually believe in luck. I think you make your own luck, and that part of that is related to activity. So in other words, if you do lots of things to create results, then the chance of those results happening are much higher than if you hope someone turns up on your door with a big order, which never happens.
Which is unlikely to happen unless you've done steps for that to occur.
So I think, I've worked with people in the Prince's Trust before as a mentor for 3 different businesses. And the thing that's most important there is, if people have got an idea, it doesn't have to be the best idea in the world, but the application, you have to believe in it, have to work really hard in it, and then you can succeed with whatever that idea is.
And on that point, which again I think is really interesting with talking to leaders or sports people that are striving and being successful in their field, is that how do you deal with those days when it's not gone so well? Or there's been a challenge of some sort or another, because I think that there's as much around that, around the persistence and the doing stuff.
I don't think you can have a business that works on sunny days only. Every business has challenges. Virtually every day, every week. I mean, ours is no different. But you just have to have an approach. When you hear bad news, it seems terrible, but when you're able to sort of put it into context or find out a bit more about this bit of bad news, then you think, well, it's not quite as bad as I thought, and this is what we can do to put that right. So I think you just have to have a measured approach about it, not allow yourself to be drawn into highs and lows.
So what's next for you? What's next for Hotel Chocolat? What's on the horizon at the moment?
Well, our big thing is we're expanding internationally, and we've already opened some stores overseas. So we've opened in Amsterdam and in Copenhagen. We've got one of our new roast and conch format stores in Copenhagen. And this is where we're roasting.
Is that the sort of the cafe style, but it's cocoa rather than coffee?
Well, it is, but it's where we're actually roasting cocoa beans on the premises. Wow. And we're then conching them, which is the grinding process of cocoa beans to turn it into chocolate. Turn them into chocolate. And then you can taste things made on the premises in different ways. So in chocolate to taste, chocolate to drink, and it's a really interesting experience. There's so many different things. I mean, we've just actually launched our range of beauty products which are based on cocoa, and they're going into our shops just this week. And so again, based on cocoa, which is our absolute theme. So they're not just a sort of broad range just with the Hotel Chocolat name. This is ones with cocoa, which we fully like because they work so well with the brand.
Yes, oh, that's fantastic.
So it's a sort of another avenue.
Yes,
and then of course
absolutely.
we have a restaurant in St Lucia, which a lot of people have said, why don't you open one in Manhattan? Why don't you open one in London? So who knows?